Hello, Guy. Welcome back. Tonight, we journey to the edge of the desert, to a plateau of limestone that holds the most iconic and enigmatic structure ever built by human hands. The Great Pyramids of Egypt stand as silent, colossal monuments there. Perfect geometry, a testament to a civilization that believed in eternity. For over 4,500 years, they have inspired awe, wonder, and endless speculation. How did a Bronze Age society, without iron tools, without the wheel for transport, and without modern machinery, quarry, move, and perfectly place millions of stone blocks, some weighing as much as a modern truck? The mysteries of their construction have been debated for centuries, giving rise to theories of lost technologies and otherworldly helpers. But the truth, as revealed by archaeology and painstaking research, is even more incredible. It is a story of human ingenuity, of immense organization, and of a society united by a profound faith. We will delve into the divine purpose that drove their creation, the lives of the skilled workers who built them, the ingenious techniques they used to move megaliths, and the great debate over the ramps that rose to the heavens. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The pyramid was not a generic monument. It was the personal possession and the ultimate expression of a single, powerful individual, the Pharaoh Khufu. Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, was the second king of Egypt's fourth dynasty, a period during the Old Kingdom, circa 2589-2566 BCE, that represents the absolute zenith of the pharaoh's power. This was an age when the king was not just a ruler. He was a living god on earth, an absolute autocrat whose authority was unquestioned, and whose resources were, for all practical purposes, limitless. The Great Pyramid is, above all else, a testament to this unique concentration of power, a monument built by a society that was completely mobilized in the service of its divine king's journey to the stars. The fourth dynasty was the Golden Age of pyramid building, a period of breathtaking architectural innovation and colossal construction projects that had no precedent and would never be equaled. This era was defined by a powerful and centralized state, a highly efficient bureaucracy, and, most importantly, a profound theological revolution centered on the sun god, Ra. While earlier kings had been primarily associated with the falcon, god Horus, the pharaohs of the fourth dynasty, began to style themselves as the son of Ra. This was a pivotal shift. It meant the king was not just a god on earth, but the physical offspring of the supreme creator god, the master of the universe. This new ideology demanded a new, more magnificent form of funerary monument, one that would directly connect the king to his celestial father. The true, smooth-sided pyramid, perfected by Khufu's father, Pharaoh, was the ultimate solar symbol, a ramp of petrified light, a physical representation of the sun's rays upon which the king's soul would ascend, to join Ra and his daily journey across the heavens. Khufu inherited this powerful ideology and a stable, prosperous kingdom from his father. Pharaoh had been the greatest pyramid builder of them all in terms of sheer volume, constructing 3 massive pyramids at Dasha and Medum in his quest to perfect the true pyramid form. These colossal projects had been the training ground, the great school of engineering that had given the Egyptian state the logistical knowledge and the skilled workforce needed to undertake an even more ambitious project. Khufu's Great Pyramid was not a sudden leap into the unknown. It was the triumphant culmination of a century of intense architectural experimentation and organizational development. Despite the fact that he built the most famous monument in the history of the world, we know remarkably little about the man. Khufu himself, his only surviving confirmed three-dimensional portrait, is a tiny 3-inch-high ivory statuette found in the ruins of the temple at Abydos. It depicts a seated king with a shaved head, wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt, his expression serene but firm. It is an almost comically small representation for a man who built on such a colossal scale. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus, writing 2,000 years after Khufu's time, painted a dark picture of him as a cruel and tyrannical megalomaniac who enslaved his own people and even forced his daughter into prostitution to fund his massive building project. This image of Khufu as a tyrant has persisted for centuries, but it is almost certainly a hostile and inaccurate piece of propaganda, reflecting the biases of later storytellers. The reality, as revealed by archaeology, is far more complex. The construction of the Great Pyramid was not an act of oppressive tyranny, but a great national project, a sacred undertaking that would have been a source of immense pride and a focus of the entire nation's religious and economic life. The workers were not slaves, but respected and well-fed craftsmen and conscripted laborers who believed that their work was essential for maintaining the cosmic order, or MAT. By ensuring the successful rebirth of their king as a god, they were ensuring the continued stability and prosperity of the entire kingdom. The pyramid was not a monument to a man's ego. It was a monument to a nation's faith in the divine nature of kingship and the promise of eternal life. The name that Khufu chose for his pyramid complex was Akhet Khufu, which means the horizon of Khufu. This name is a profound statement of the pyramid's purpose. The horizon was the place where the sun rose and set, the magical threshold between the earthly world and the duat, the realm of the gods. By naming his pyramid the horizon, Khufu was declaring that his monument was not just a tomb, but a powerful gateway, a nexus point between the mortal and the divine, the place from which he would be reborn, just as the sun is reborn each morning. On the eastern horizon, the pyramid complex was a vast and integrated machine for resurrection. It began with the valley temple on the banks of the Nile, where the king's body would have been received after its final journey down the river. From there, a long, covered causeway led up to the mortuary temple, which stood against the pyramid's eastern face. This temple was the site of the king's eternal cult, where priests would perform the daily rituals to nourish his spirit. The pyramid itself, the great silent mountain of stone, was the final sealed chamber of transformation. It was a house of eternity, designed to protect the king's body from all harm and to serve as the magical launching pad for his soul's ascent to the heavens. The king's role as the divine intermediary was absolute. The well-being of the entire nation was believed to rest on his shoulders. His successful transition to the afterlife was not just a personal concern. It was a matter of national security. If the king was not properly buried and his cult was not maintained, the cosmic order would be thrown into disarray. The sun might not rise, the Nile might not flood, and the land of Egypt could fall back into the primordial chaos from which it had been created. The immense resources that Khufu poured into his pyramid were, therefore, seen as a necessary and pious investment in the future of the nation. In 1954, a remarkable discovery was made at the foot of the Great Pyramid, 1. That provides a vivid insight into the solar theology of Khufu's reign. In a sealed, airtight pit, archaeologists found a full-sized, completely disassembled ship, a magnificent vessel made of Lebanese cedar, over 143 feet long. This was the solar bark of Khufu. It had been dismantled into over 1,200 pieces and carefully buried, ready to be magically reassembled for the king's use in the afterlife. This was a ship that would carry the resurrected king's soul, alongside his father Ra, on their daily journey across the sky and their nightly journey through the perils of the underworld. The discovery of this perfectly preserved 4,600-year-old ship is a powerful and tangible link to the beliefs that drove the pyramid builders. The world of Khufu and the Fourth Dynasty was a world of absolute certainty and immense confidence. The Pharaoh was a god, his power was supreme, and the resources of the entire nation were his to command. The construction of the Great Pyramid was the ultimate expression of this worldview. It was a statement of power, a monument of faith, and a sacred national project to ensure the eternal stability of the cosmos. To unravel its secrets, we must try to see it not with our modern eyes, but as Khufu and his people saw it, not as a tomb, but as a horizon, a glowing white mountain of light that was the very engine of their civilization's survival. The decision of where to build a pyramid was one of the most important a pharaoh would ever make. The location had to be just right, a place that was both practically suited for a construction project of immense scale and theologically charged with sacred meaning. For his eternal home, the horizon of Khufu, Pharaoh Khufu chose the Giza Plateau. This slab of desert bedrock on the west bank of the Nile, just at the edge of the ancient capital of Memphis, was a perfect choice. It was a place where geology, theology, and logistics converged, a sacred landscape that was ideally suited to become the stage for the greatest construction project of the ancient world. The secrets of the Great Pyramid begin with the secrets of the ground upon which it stands. The first and most important practical advantage of the Giza Plateau was its geology. The plateau was a solid, stable outcrop of limestone bedrock, part of what is known as the Makatam Formation. This provided a firm and unyielding foundation capable of supporting the immense weight of the pyramid, which is estimated to be around 6 million tons, without any risk of subsidence. To build such a massive structure on the softer alluvial soil of the floodplain would have been impossible. The builders were expert geologists who understood that the stability of their monument depended entirely on the quality of the rock beneath it. Even more importantly, the Giza Plateau itself could serve as a gigantic quarry. The majority of the 2.3 million stone blocks that make up the core of the Great Pyramid were quarried directly from the plateau, just a few hundred yards south of the construction site. This was a logistical masterstroke. It eliminated the need to transport millions of tons of stone over long distances. The outlines of these vast quarries are still visible today, a great horseshoe-shaped depression that shows where the builders literally carved the heart of the plateau away to create the pyramid. The Sphinx, the great statue of a lion with a human head that guards the Giza necropolis, was not brought to the site. It was carved in situ from a massive, single outcrop of this same limestone that was left behind in the quarry. The builders turned a geological obstacle into one of the most iconic monuments on Earth. The location also had to be on the west bank of the Nile. For the ancient Egyptians, the east, the land of the rising sun, was the land of the living. The west, the land of the setting sun, was the land of the dead. All of the pyramids and all of the major necropolises were located on the west bank, the traditional gateway to the underworld and the afterlife. Giza was perfectly situated, high on the desert escarpment overlooking the floodplain and the great capital city of Memphis. From the city, the pyramid would have been a constant and powerful presence on the western horizon, a daily reminder of the king's power and his divine destiny. The theological significance of Giza was also likely a key factor in its selection. The site was located in close proximity to the ancient city of Heliopolis, the city of the sun, which was the primary center of worship for the sun god, Ra. During the Fourth Dynasty, as the pharaohs increasingly identified themselves as the son of Ra, it would have been ideologically crucial for their funerary monuments to be located within the theological orbit of Ra's main cult center. Some scholars have even suggested that the name Giza itself may derive from an ancient Egyptian phrase meaning the high place, indicating that the plateau was recognized as a sacred elevated landscape long before the pyramids were built. The precise location of the pyramids on the plateau was not chosen at random. It was determined by a sophisticated understanding of surveying and, most importantly, astronomy. The alignment of the three Giza pyramids has been the subject of intense speculation for centuries. The most famous of these theories, the Orion correlation theory, proposed by Robert Oval, suggests that the layout of the three pyramids was a deliberate attempt to create a map of the three stars in Orion's belt on the ground. According to this theory, the slightly offset position of the third and smallest pyramid, that of Menkaure, perfectly mirrors the offset position of the third star in the belt. Boval also argues that the so-called air shafts within the Great Pyramid were not for ventilation, but were precisely aligned to point to specific sacred stars, such as Orion and Sirius, at the time the pyramid was built, to serve as channels for the king's soul to travel to its celestial destination. While the Orion correlation theory is highly controversial and not accepted by most mainstream Egyptologists, who point out that the alignments are not as perfect as claimed and that it requires a selective use of the evidence. It does highlight a crucial truth. The pyramids were undeniably aligned with a profound astronomical precision. The four sides of the Great Pyramid are oriented to the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, with an accuracy that is almost miraculous. The average error is less than 3/60ths of a single degree of true north. This was a sacred, not just a technical requirement. By aligning his monument so perfectly with the cosmos, Khufu was integrating his eternal house into the very fabric of the universe, ensuring its stability and its proper magical function. The north, in particular, was the most important direction. The entrance to the pyramid is on the north face, and the descending passage points downwards towards the northern sky. The Egyptians associated the northern circumpolar stars, the stars that never set below the horizon, with eternity and the afterlife. These imperishable ones were the eternal destination of the king's soul, and the northern alignment of the pyramid was a crucial part of the divine blueprint for his journey. The final logistical consideration in choosing Giza was its access to the Nile. While the local quarries provided the core blocks, the fine white limestone for the casing had to be brought from Tura, and the massive granite beams had to be brought from Aswan. The only way to transport these stones was by boat on the river. The recent archaeological work by Mark Lenner, combined with the discovery of the Diary of Mira, has revealed that the Egyptians constructed a sophisticated system of canals and a large artificial harbor at the foot of the Giza Plateau. This pyramid port would have been at its busiest during the annual inundation, when the flood waters of the Nile filled the canals and allowed the great barges carrying their precious cargo to sail right up to the construction site. This system was the final piece of the logistical puzzle, the crucial link that connected the sacred ground of the Giza Plateau to the resources of the entire kingdom. The choice of Giza was, therefore, a master stroke of planning. It was a place where all the necessary conditions, a solid geological foundation, an abundant local source of building material, a sacred location on the west bank, a profound theological connection to the sun god, and logistical access to the Nile all came together in a perfect convergence. The builders of the Great Pyramid did not just build a monument on the landscape. They first read that landscape, understanding its practical potential and its sacred meaning, and then they transformed it into the perfect, cosmically aligned stage for their king's eternal drama. The Great Pyramid is not just a triumph of labor. It is, above all, a triumph of the mind. Behind the sweat of the quarrymen and the muscle of the hauling crews stood a small, elite group of anonymous geniuses, the architects, the surveyors, and the master builders who designed and orchestrated this monumental undertaking. These men were the keepers of the secret knowledge, the masters of a sophisticated body of architectural, mathematical, and astronomical wisdom that was passed down through a closed society of scribes and priests. While the name of the chief architect of the Great Pyramid is not known with absolute certainty, tradition and archaeological evidence point to a man named Heminu, a vizier and a nephew of the Pharaoh Khufu. A magnificent, life-sized statue of Heminu found in his tomb at Giza shows a powerful, intelligent, and realistic portrait of the man who was likely the mastermind behind the greatest construction project of the ancient world. The secrets of the pyramid builders were not secrets of lost technologies or alien powers. They were the secrets of a profound intellectual mastery of the world around them. The first and most fundamental secret of the architects was their mastery of mathematics and geometry. The Great Pyramid is a symphony of numbers, a structure whose proportions and dimensions exhibit a level of mathematical sophistication that has fascinated and puzzled scholars for centuries. The Egyptians did not have a complex system of mathematical notation like our own. They worked primarily with fractions and simple arithmetic. Yet, with these basic tools, they were able to achieve results of incredible precision. The base of the Great Pyramid is an almost perfect square. Its four sides, each over 755 feet long, are equal to within a few inches. The four corners are almost perfect 90-degree right angles. To achieve this, the builders likely used a simple but highly effective method of rope stretching, a form of practical, applied geometry. They would have used measuring cords made of linen or palm fiber, which were carefully coated with wax or resin to prevent them from stretching and to ensure a standard unit of measurement, the royal cubit, about 20.6 inches. They likely created their perfect right angles by using a rope with knots tied at intervals to form a 3-4-5 right-angled triangle, a practical application of the Pythagorean theorem 2,000 years before Pythagoras. The proportions of the pyramid itself are even more remarkable and have led to endless speculation about the builder's secret knowledge. It appears that the Egyptians designed the pyramid using a specific ratio that relates its height to the perimeter of its base. This ratio is equivalent to the mathematical relationship between the radius and the circumference of a circle. In other words, if you take the height of the pyramid as the radius of a circle, the perimeter of the pyramid's base is almost exactly equal to the circumference of that circle. This means that the builders must have had a very accurate knowledge of the value of pi. The value of pi embedded in the pyramid's dimensions is approximately 3.142, which is remarkably close to the true value. Furthermore, the slope of the pyramid's faces, an angle of approximately 51.84 degrees, appears to be a deliberate choice that incorporates another famous mathematical relationship, the golden ratio, or phi, approximately 1.618, the ratio of the slant height of the pyramid to half the base length is extremely close to the value of phi. Was this intentional? Did the Egyptians have a conscious theoretical knowledge of these transcendental numbers, pi and phi? Or were these relationships simply the natural, accidental byproduct of a simpler practical method of construction, perhaps based on using a rolling drum to measure out the dimensions? This is one of the great debates of pyramidology. Whether intentional or not, the result is a structure of profound mathematical harmony and elegance, a testament to a deep, intuitive understanding of geometric principles. The second great secret of the builders was their mastery of astronomy. As we have seen, the orientation of the pyramid to the cardinal directions is almost perfect. This feat of celestial alignment, likely achieved by observing the circumpolar stars, was the essential first step in laying out the monument. But their astronomical knowledge extended further. The internal passages of the pyramid also seem to have been designed with a specific astronomical purpose. The descending passage, for example, points downwards at an angle of about 26 degrees. An observer lying in this passage at the time the pyramid was built would have been looking directly at the celestial North Pole, the pivot point of the heavens around which the imperishable northern stars revolved, the so-called air shafts that lead out from the king's and queen's chambers are even more intriguing. These narrow 4.5-inch square shafts are not for ventilation. They were sealed at both ends and would have been useless for circulating air. Their purpose was almost certainly ritual and astronomical. The shafts are angled to point at specific, religiously significant stars. The southern shaft of the king's chamber pointed directly to the belt of Orion, which the Egyptians associated with the god Osiris. The northern shaft pointed to the circumpolar stars, the eternal destination of the king. These shafts were therefore star shafts, magical channels designed to allow the king's soul to travel out from his burial chamber and ascend to his celestial destiny, to become one with Osiris among the stars. The precise calculation and construction of these long, narrow shafts, running for hundreds of feet through the solid masonry of the pyramid at a perfect angle, was an engineering challenge of the first order. The third great secret of the architects was their skill in project management and logistics. The construction of the Great Pyramid was not just an architectural challenge. It was the largest logistical operation the world had ever seen. The architect, Heminu, would have had to be the ultimate project manager. He would have had to coordinate the quarrying of stone from 3 different locations, the transportation of these materials by land and by river, the housing and feeding of a workforce of over 20,000 people, and the day-to-day scheduling of the work itself. This required a level of foresight, planning, and administration that is simply staggering. The entire project would have been planned out in immense detail before the first block was ever cut. The architects would have created detailed blueprints and models. A large team of scribes would have been responsible for the complex accounting, tracking every block of stone, every measure of grain, and every jug of beer. They would have kept detailed work logs, like the one found in the Diary of Mirror, recording the progress of each work gang. The entire Giza Plateau would have been a highly organized, quasi-military operation with a clear chain of command running from the vizier at the top, down through the overseers of works, the master craftsmen, the foremen, and finally to the individual laborers. The secret to building the pyramid was not a single magical technology, but this incredible, fanatical level of organization. The mind of the architect also had to solve immense structural challenges. The construction of the king's chamber, with its flat roof of massive granite beams, was a particular problem. The architects knew that the immense weight of the pyramid above would crush this flat roof. Their solution, the 5 secret relieving chambers, was a stroke of genius. This complex, layered system of granite beams and a final gabled roof, hidden deep within the pyramid, was designed to deflect the immense structural forces away from the burial chamber and down into the solid core of the monument. This was a sophisticated piece of structural engineering, a secret safety feature that ensured the eternal integrity of the king's final resting place. The builders of the Great Pyramid were not primitive laborers working by brute force alone. They were the inheritors of a deep and ancient intellectual tradition. They were practical scientists who understood the principles of geometry, astronomy, and structural engineering with a level of sophistication that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. The secret knowledge they possessed was the product of centuries of careful observation, practical experimentation, and the meticulous recording and transmission of that knowledge through their scribal schools and the secret archives of the House of Life. The Great Pyramid is the ultimate testament to their genius, a monument that is not just a pile of stones, but a perfectly realized idea, an intellectual construct of immense power and precision. The construction of the Great Pyramid, a project that involved the quarrying, transportation, and placement of some 2.3 million stone blocks, was an undertaking of almost unimaginable scale. For centuries, the popular imagination, shaped by the biblical story of the Hebrews in Egypt and the dramatic accounts of the Greek historian Herodotus, pictured this colossal monument being built by a vast army of slaves, groaning under the whips of cruel overseers and dying in their tens of thousands. This powerful and enduring image of brutal oppression has fueled the narrative of the pyramids as monuments to a tyrant's ego. However, decades of painstaking archaeological work, particularly the groundbreaking discoveries made at the Giza Plateau over the past 30 years, have completely and definitively overturned this myth. The pyramids were not built by slaves. They were built by a dedicated, well-fed, and highly organized workforce of native Egyptian craftsmen and laborers, a veritable army of the people, who were motivated not by fear, but by a deep sense of civic duty and religious devotion to their divine king. The true secret of the pyramid workforce is not a story of oppression, but one of extraordinary social organization. The key to understanding the pyramid workforce lies in the natural rhythm of the Egyptian agricultural year, a cycle dictated by the river Nile, the annual inundation, which flooded the fields from roughly July to October, made agricultural work impossible. This created a large, idle workforce of farmers who were available for other tasks. The brilliant pharaohs of the Old Kingdom, with their highly efficient and centralized state bureaucracy, ingeniously harnessed this immense reservoir of manpower through a system of national service or corvée labor. For a few months out of the year, during the flood season, a certain number of able-bodied men from each village and province would be conscripted to work on the king's great building projects. This was not slavery, but a form of taxation, paid in labor instead of money or grain. To be called to serve on the pyramid project was a civic and religious duty, a way of contributing to the most important national project of their time, ensuring the successful afterlife of their divine king, and, by extension, the stability and prosperity of the entire cosmos. To house, feed, and manage this enormous rotating workforce, which may have numbered as many as 20,000 to 30,000 men at its peak. The Egyptians built a sophisticated, purpose-built city on the Giza Plateau, located in a sandy basin just south of the main pyramid complex. The discovery and ongoing excavation of this lost city of the pyramid builders, led by the archaeologist Mark Lenner and his team, has provided a stunningly detailed picture of the lives of these ancient workers. This was no miserable slave camp. It was a highly organized and well-planned urban center, the largest and earliest of its kind in the world, a testament to the state's commitment to its workforce. The city was centered around a series of long gallery-like structures that served as barracks for the rotating teams of laborers. These galleries were not just open dormitories. They were self-contained units, each with its own sleeping platforms, cooking areas, and storage facilities. They were organized and orderly, a place for the workers to eat, sleep, and rest after their long days of labor. The archaeological evidence from the workers' city shows that the laborers were remarkably well-fed and well cared for, a fact that directly contradicts the slave labor narrative. The excavation of the city's massive bakeries, with their large mixing vats and hundreds of conical bread molds, and its breweries, indicates that the workers received the standard Egyptian ration of bread and beer in large quantities. More surprisingly, the analysis of the vast quantities of animal bones found in the city's refuse heaps, a field of study known as zooarchaeology, has revealed that the workers enjoyed a diet rich in high-quality protein. They were regularly supplied with beef, primarily from young male cattle, as well as mutton and goat meat. This was a diet of luxury, far better than that of the average Egyptian farmer back in his village. The sheer number of cattle bones suggests that thousands of prime cattle were being shipped to Giza from the fertile farming estates of the Nile Delta, a massive logistical operation dedicated solely to feeding the workforce. This was not the diet of an enslaved and downtrodden population, but of a valued and essential workforce, whose physical strength was seen as a vital state resource. Further evidence of the workers' status comes from the discovery of their medical care. The skeletons, found in the workers' cemetery, located on a hillside just west of the city, show that these men engaged in hard, dangerous labor. Their bones show the signs of immense physical stress, degenerative arthritis in their backs and knees, and a high rate of industrial accidents, including crushed fingers, broken limbs, and fractured skulls. However, many of these skeletons also show clear evidence of expert medical treatment. There are cleanly set broken bones, amputated limbs that had healed successfully, and even evidence of successful brain surgery on a man who had suffered a head injury. This indicates that the state provided a high level of medical care for its workers, a sign that they were considered a valuable resource to be cared for and healed, not disposable slaves to be worked to death. The workforce itself was organized with a remarkable degree of military-like precision. The laborers were divided into large crews or gangs, each of which had its own name, its own identity, and its own competitive spirit. Inscriptions found scrawled on the blocks of the pyramids and in the workers' tombs show that the crews were given proud and boisterous names, often incorporating the name of the king they were serving, such as the Drunkards of Menkaure or the Friends of Khufu gang. This sense of team identity would have fostered a sense of camaraderie and esprit de corps among the men. These large gangs were further subdivided into smaller groups called zia or files, which in turn were divided into divisions. This highly structured hierarchical organization, from the individual worker up to the gang foreman and the royal overseer, allowed the architects to manage this vast army of people with incredible efficiency. The workforce was composed of two main groups. There was a permanent, skilled workforce of craftsmen who lived in the village year-round with their families in more substantial private houses. These were the master stonemasons, the architects, the surveyors, the tool-makers, and the artists, who possessed the secret, technical knowledge of pyramid building. They were the career professionals, the men who planned the logistics, performed the most difficult and precise tasks, and passed their skills down from father to son. Then there was the much larger rotating workforce of temporary laborers, the conscripted farmers who came from all over Egypt for a few months at a time to perform the heavy manual labor, quarrying the core blocks, hauling them on sledges to the construction site, and helping to raise them up the growing pyramid. Perhaps the most compelling evidence against the slave labor theory, And the most poignant evidence for the humanity of the workers comes from their own cemetery. To be buried at Giza, at the foot of the sacred pyramids of their kings, was a great honor. The tombs of the workers are modest mud-brick mastabas with small stone-lined chapels, but they were built with care and in imitation of the tombs of the elite. The workers were buried with respect, provided with pottery vessels containing bread and beer for their journey to the next world. Some of the foremen and master craftsmen had more elaborate tombs, their walls decorated with simple but vibrant reliefs depicting their work and their proud titles. These burials show that the workers were not social outcasts, but respected members of the community whose contribution to the divine project of the pyramid was seen as a path to their own blessed afterlife. The pyramids, then, were built by an army of the Egyptian people, a society that was capable of organizing and motivating its population on a scale that was unprecedented. They were a true national project, a testament not to the power of the whip, but to the power of a shared faith and a common monumental purpose. The Great Pyramid is, at its core, a mountain of stone, a colossal jigsaw puzzle assembled from some 2.3 million individual blocks. The story of how each of these stones made its journey from the living bedrock of the earth to its final precise position in the growing monument is an epic of engineering, logistics, and sheer human effort. The Egyptian builders, working without iron tools or wheeled transport, faced a series of immense challenges. How to quarry the stone, how to transport blocks weighing several tons, and how to do so with the speed and efficiency required to complete the pyramid within the lifetime of a single king. Their solutions, a combination of brilliant simplicity and staggering organizational skill, are one of the greatest secrets of the pyramid's construction. The journey of a stone began in the quarries. The vast majority of the pyramid's bulk, the core blocks, was hewn from the Giza Plateau itself. This yellowish nummulitic limestone, while coarse and of relatively low quality, was abundant and, most importantly, close at hand. The choice of the Giza Plateau as the construction site was a logistical masterstroke, as it meant the primary building material had to be moved only a few hundred yards. The quarrymen would first clear the surface of loose sand to expose a solid bed of rock. Then, using their deep, practical knowledge of the stone's natural bedding planes, they would plan out a grid of blocks. The main tool for this work was a dolerite pounder, a heavy hand-held ball of hard igneous rock. Workers would relentlessly bash these pounders against the limestone, slowly pulverizing the rock to create deep, narrow trenches around a block on three sides. For finer cutting, they used copper chisels, the hardest metal available to them. The quarry would have been a scene of constant, percussive noise and clouds of white dust as hundreds of men worked to free the blocks. The final, crucial step was to break the block away from the bedrock at its base. This was likely accomplished using wooden wedges. The quarrymen would cut a series of slots along the base, hammer dry wooden wedges into them, and then soak the wedges with water. The slow, irresistible expansion of the wet wood would exert immense pressure, causing the limestone to split cleanly along its natural fault line. While the Giza limestone was perfect for the core, the pyramid's beautiful, smooth outer surface required a stone of much higher quality. For this, the builders turned to the quarries of Tura, on the opposite bank of the Nile. The Tura limestone was a fine, dense, pure white stone, and it was used to create the magnificent, polished casing that would have made the pyramid gleam in the sun. The quarrying at Tura was a more difficult and dangerous operation, as the best stone lay deep underground. Workers had to tunnel into the cliffs, creating a network of subterranean galleries and chambers to extract the stone, a dark and claustrophobic form of mining dot for the most important structural elements inside the pyramid, such as the massive roof beams of the king's chamber and the sarcophagus itself. An even stronger stone was needed. For this, the Egyptians made an epic journey 500 miles south to the quarries of Aswan, the source of a beautiful, immensely hard, pinkish granite. Quarrying this crystalline rock with Bronze Age tools was a monumental challenge. The workers used their heavy dolerite pounders to slowly bash out the trenches around the colossal blocks, a process that could take months or even years for a single large beam. Once the blocks were freed, the next great challenge was transportation. The core blocks from the Giza quarry were loaded onto large, sturdy wooden sledges. Teams of workers would then haul these sledges across the plateau. For centuries it was a mystery how they could have done this efficiently, as dragging a multi-ton sledge across dry sand creates immense friction. The secret was revealed by a painting in a Middle Kingdom tomb and confirmed by modern experiments. A worker would walk in front of the sledge and pour a small, precise amount of water onto the sand. This simple trick of physics would stiffen the sand, dramatically reducing the friction and cutting the required pulling force by up to half. For the stones from Tura and Aswan, the Egyptians used their great liquid highway, the Nile. The massive granite blocks would be maneuvered onto enormous barges for the long journey north. Loading an 80-ton block onto a boat was a feat of engineering in itself. It is likely that a canal was dug from the river to a loading basin directly beneath the quarried block. The barge would be floated into the basin at the height of the Nile's flood, and as the waters receded, the barge would be grounded. The block could then be dragged or levered over the top of the stationary vessel. When the next year's flood came, the rising waters would lift the barge and its colossal cargo, and it could be floated out into the river. The recent discovery of a collection of papyri, known as the Diary of Mirror, has provided a revolutionary first-hand account of this process. Mirror was a foreman who worked during the reign of Khufu, and his logbook is the only contemporary eyewitness account of the pyramid's construction ever found. He provides a detailed, day-by-day record of his crew's activities, which involved transporting the fine Tura limestone casing stones to the Giza site. His diary describes how his crew would sail to the Tura quarries, where the pre-cut blocks were loaded onto their boat. He then details their journey back to Giza, a journey that involved navigating not just the Nile, but a sophisticated, man-made system of canals. This confirms the groundbreaking archaeological work of Mark Lenner, whose team has excavated the remains of a lost pyramid port at the foot of the Giza Plateau. The Egyptians had essentially brought the Nile right to the pyramid. A series of canals, which would have been flooded during the annual inundation, connected the main river to a large artificial harbor located directly at the end of the pyramid's causeway. This meant that the barges carrying the heavy Tura limestone and the colossal Aswan granite could deliver their cargo just a few hundred feet from the base of the pyramid, dramatically reducing the distance they had to be dragged overland. The inundation season was, therefore, not just the time when the main workforce was available. It was also the primary delivery season for the most important stones. The entire construction project was meticulously planned to work in harmony. With the natural rhythms of the river Dot, the journey of the stones was a masterpiece of logistics, a perfectly coordinated ballet of quarrying, hauling, sailing, and delivery that stretched over hundreds of miles and involved tens of thousands of people. It was a system that combined brute force with a sophisticated understanding of physics, geology, and hydraulics. Each of the 2.3 million stones in the Great Pyramid has its own epic story, a silent testament to the ingenuity and the immense organizational power of the ancient Egyptian state. With the foundation perfectly prepared and an efficient supply chain delivering a constant stream of stone blocks to the Giza Plateau, the Egyptian builders faced the central and most daunting challenge of pyramid construction: how to lift millions of tons of stone, block by heavy block, to heights of over 450 feet. This is the great enduring mystery of the pyramids, the question that has sparked more debate, speculation, and imaginative theories than any other aspect of their construction. How did they go up? In a world without cranes, pulleys, or complex machinery, the Egyptians must have relied on the simple but powerful principle of the inclined plane, or ramp. The consensus among Egyptologists is that the primary method for raising the blocks was a system of massive construction ramps. However, the exact form that these ramps took, their shape, their size, their location, is the subject of intense scholarly debate. There's no single definitive answer, no ancient blueprint that has survived. Instead, we have a number of compelling theories, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, based on the subtle clues left behind in the archaeological and architectural evidence. The secret of the ramps is a fascinating intellectual puzzle, a reverse engineering challenge that takes us to the heart of the builders' genius. The most straightforward and oldest theory is that of a single, massive, linear ramp. In this model, a long, straight ramp built of rubble, taffla, a local clay, and mud brick would have been constructed against one face of the pyramid. As the pyramid grew in height, the ramp would have been simultaneously extended in length and raised in height to maintain a manageable, gentle slope, probably no more than 8 to 10%. Teams of workers would then haul the blocks on their sledges up this great, singular causeway to the working level of the pyramid. The primary advantage of this theory is its simplicity. It would have provided a wide, straight, and direct path for moving large numbers of blocks simultaneously, allowing for an efficient flow of materials to the top. There is some archaeological precedent for this, as the remains of smaller, straight construction ramps have been found at other, earlier mastaba tombs and smaller pyramids, suggesting this was a known technique. However, when this theory is applied to a monument on the colossal scale of the Great Pyramid of Khufu, a number of significant and perhaps insurmountable problems arise. To reach the final height of the pyramid, which was originally 481 feet, a ramp with a gentle 8% slope would have had to be over a mile long. The sheer volume of material required to build such a ramp would have been immense, a monumental construction project in its own right. Some calculations suggest that the volume of the ramp could have even exceeded the volume of the pyramid itself. Building this colossal structure, and then, crucially, completely dismantling it after the pyramid's completion, would have been an incredible undertaking. The dismantling process would have left behind a massive amount of debris, a literal mountain of rubble, none of which has ever been found in the vicinity of the Giza pyramids. Furthermore, a single straight ramp would have completely obscured one entire face of the pyramid, making it impossible for the surveyors to take the necessary sightings on the corners and edges to maintain the structure's precise geometric angles as it was being built. For these reasons, while intuitively simple, most modern Egyptologists have concluded that a single, massive external linear ramp is an unlikely solution for the entirety of the construction. A second major theory, designed to solve the volume problem, proposes a zigzag or switchback ramp. In this model, the ramp would have run back and forth up a single face of the pyramid, similar to a modern mountain road. This would have dramatically reduced the overall footprint and the total volume of the ramp, as it would be largely supported by the pyramid face itself. However, this design presents its own set of severe logistical difficulties. The sharp 180-degree hairpin turns at each end of the ramp would have been extremely difficult to navigate with a heavy sledge carrying a multi-ton block. Maneuvering the long sledges around these tight corners would have been a logistical nightmare, requiring complex and time-consuming lifting and pivoting operations at each turn, which would have severely slowed down the pace of construction. A more plausible variation of the external ramp theory, and one that has gained considerable support, is the spiral or wraparound ramp. In this model, the ramp would have started at the base of the pyramid and then corkscrewed its way up around all four faces of the structure as it grew. This elegant solution solves the volume problem, as the ramp would be built directly on top of the already laid core blocks of the pyramid itself, using a minimal amount of additional material. It would also have the advantage of allowing the four corners of the pyramid to remain exposed for most of the construction process. The surveyors could have used these exposed corners as reference points to maintain the building's precise geometry as it rose, a crucial requirement for achieving the perfect pyramid shape. However, this theory also has its critics. A wrap-around ramp would have covered all four faces of the pyramid, making it difficult to take long-distance sightings to check the overall alignment of the structure. The corners of a spiral ramp, while not as sharp as a zigzag ramp, would still have presented a challenge for maneuvering the sledges. Additionally, a continuous spiral ramp would not have been perfectly level. It would have had a slight inward slope to hug the pyramid and a continuous gradient, which might have complicated the hauling process. Despite these issues, some form of external encasing ramp is still considered a strong possibility by many scholars, including the prominent archaeologist Mark Lenner, who has found evidence of what may be the remains of such a ramp at the base of the Great Pyramid. In recent years, one of the most intriguing, sophisticated, and widely discussed theories has been proposed by the French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin. Houdin's theory is a composite one, suggesting that the Egyptians used two different types of ramps in two different phases of construction. He argues that a relatively short, straight, external ramp was used to build the lower third of the pyramid, This lower section accounts for over 60% of the pyramid's total volume, and this initial ramp would have been relatively short and manageable, allowing for the rapid transport of the majority of the blocks. To build the upper two-thirds of the pyramid, Houdin proposes a revolutionary and elegant solution, the use of an internal ramp. He suggests that the builders constructed a long, narrow tunnel, a ramp in the shape of a corkscrew, just inside the outer edge of the pyramid, which spiraled its way up as the pyramid was being built. The blocks would have been hauled up this internal corridor to the working level. As each section of the ramp was completed, the builders would have used the core blocks from the ramp itself to build the next level of the pyramid, effectively consuming their own ramp as they went. Houdin's theory is compelling for several reasons. It elegantly solves the problems of the massive external ramps. It would have been far more efficient in terms of materials, as the ramp was built from the pyramid's own core blocks. It would have left the faces of the pyramid, and particularly the all-important corners, completely clear, allowing the surveyors to do their work unhindered. And it provides a practical solution for how the pyramid could have been completed in the estimated 20-year time frame. The theory is also supported by some intriguing physical evidence. In 1986, a French team conducted a microgravimetric survey of the Great Pyramid, a technique that measures the density of the structure. Their survey revealed a mysterious low-density anomaly, a spiral-shaped feature just inside the pyramid's outer walls, which corresponds exactly to the location and shape of Houdin's proposed internal ramp. Furthermore, about a third of the way up the pyramid's northeast corner, there is a prominent notch in the structure that has long puzzled observers. Houdin argues that this notch is an ancient construction feature, an open space left at the corner of the internal ramp that would have been used as a kind of primitive crane, where workers could use a system of levers to pivot the heavy blocks around the 90-degree turn before continuing up the next leg of the ramp. Recent thermal imaging scans of the pyramid, which have revealed other hidden anomalies, also seem to be consistent with the internal ramp theory. A very recent and exciting discovery from one of the ancient quarries has provided another possible clue. An archaeological team discovered the remains of a ramp system at a Hatnob alabaster quarry that is contemporary with the Great Pyramid. This ramp was very steep, but had staircases on either side and a series of post holes. It is believed that the workers would have used a system of ropes and wooden posts, a kind of pulley system, to help haul the sledges up the steep incline. While this was found in a quarry and not at the pyramid itself, it shows that the Egyptians were using more complex ramp and haulage systems than previously thought. It is highly likely that the Egyptians did not rely on a single monolithic method, but used a clever combination of different techniques that were adapted as the construction progressed. A larger, external ramp was almost certainly used for the lower levels. For the higher, more difficult sections, a smaller, more efficient internal or spiral ramp, perhaps in combination with systems of levers and more complex rope mechanics, would have been employed. The great ramp debate is not yet settled, and it may never be. The Egyptians were masters of cleaning up after themselves, and they left behind very few direct clues about their construction methods. But the ongoing research, the application of new scientific technologies, and the compelling evidence for the internal ramp theory suggest that we are closer than ever to understanding the brilliant and pragmatic solution that the ancient builders devised to solve the greatest engineering challenge of their time, the long, slow, relentless climb to the sky. While the sheer external size and perfect geometry of the Great Pyramid are what first capture the imagination, the interior architecture is, in many ways, an even greater feat of engineering and a deeper mystery. The construction of the internal passages and chambers, particularly the magnificent Grand Gallery and the granite-lined King's Chamber, required an extraordinary level of planning, breathtaking precision, and the ability to lift and position colossal stones with pinpoint accuracy in the dark, cramped heart of the growing monument. The inner sanctum of the pyramid was not a simple tomb, but a complex, multi-layered fortress, a sacred and sealed space meticulously designed for the pharaoh's final magical transformation. The construction of these internal spaces was a logistical and engineering challenge that pushed the limits of Bronze Age technology and reveals the profound sophistication of the ancient architects. The internal layout of the Great Pyramid of Khufu is unique and far more complex than that of any other pyramid, showing clear evidence of several changes of plan during its construction. This suggests that the architects were innovating and adapting their design as they built. There are three main chambers. The first is a subterranean chamber, cut deep into the limestone bedrock beneath the pyramid. This was part of the original plan, a design that followed the traditional pattern of a burial beneath the monument. However, for reasons that are still unknown, this chamber was abandoned, left rough and unfinished. The builders then began a new plan, starting an ascending passage that led up into the heart of the pyramid's masonry. This passage leads to Pu, the second main chamber, the so-called Queen's Chamber. This is a beautifully constructed room with a high, gabled roof, located directly on the pyramid's central axis. But this chamber, too, was apparently abandoned. Its name is a misnomer from early Arab explorers. It was almost certainly intended for the king, not a queen. It was also left slightly unfinished, and its purpose in the grand scheme of the pyramid remains a mystery. Was it a backup burial chamber, or was it intended to house a sacred cave statue of the king? After abandoning the Queen's Chamber, the builders embarked on their third and final, most ambitious plan. They continued the ascending passage upwards, but here it suddenly transforms into one of the most spectacular and mysterious spaces in all of ancient architecture, the Grand Gallery. To emerge from the low, cramped ascending passage into the Grand Gallery is a breathtaking experience. It is a long, high, and narrow corridor, over 150 feet long and soaring to a height of nearly 29 feet. Its walls are made of huge, beautifully polished blocks of fine limestone, and most astonishingly, its roof is a magnificent and perfectly executed corbelled vault. A corbelled vault is created by progressively overlapping successive courses of stone blocks, with each of the 7 courses projecting slightly further inward than the one below it, until the 2 walls are only a few feet apart at the top. This technique creates a strong, stable roof capable of supporting immense weight, but it requires incredible precision in the cutting and placing of the stones. The function of the Grand Gallery has long been one of the pyramid's greatest puzzles. It is far too large and elaborate to be a simple corridor. One theory is that its primary purpose was structural, to serve as a massive internal buttress, its clever design helping to channel the immense weight of the masonry above away from the delicate passages below. A more compelling theory is that the gallery was a key part of the pyramid's construction and burial machinery. It may have been used as a storage area during construction for the massive granite, PLUGN blocks that would be used to seal the ascending passage after the king's burial. A series of mysterious slots and grooves along the side ramps of the gallery floor suggests that a complex system of ropes and wooden counterweights may have been housed here, a system that was used both to lower the ceiling blocks into place and perhaps, as proposed by the architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, to help haul the colossal granite beams up to the level of the king's chamber dot at the top of the grand gallery. After climbing a large step, a short, low passage leads into the final and most sacred space in the entire monument, the king's chamber. The transition is both architecturally and symbolically dramatic. One leaves the polished white limestone of the gallery and enters a chamber constructed entirely of a different, more powerful material, dark reddish-pink granite from the distant quarries of Aswan. The chamber is a perfect double square, a masterpiece of precise, austere, and somber geometry. The walls, floor, and ceiling are all made of this incredibly hard stone, the massive blocks cut and fitted together with a precision that is almost seamless, the joints often invisible to the naked eye. Within this granite sanctum sits the Pharaoh's sarcophagus, also carved from a single massive block of granite. It is famously plain and undecorated. A curious feature of the sarcophagus is that it is slightly larger than the entrance to the chamber. This provides a definitive clue to the construction sequence. The sarcophagus must have been placed in the chamber as the pyramid was being built. Around it, long before the roof was put on, it was a piece of furniture installed in a house that was still under construction. The greatest engineering challenge in building the king's chamber was its roof. The chamber is located high up in the pyramid, and its roof had to be designed to support the crushing weight of the millions of tons of stone that would eventually be piled on top of it. A simple flat roof, even one made of granite, would have been instantly crushed by the immense focused pressure from above. The builder's solution was one of the most brilliant and innovative in all of ancient engineering, a secret that remained hidden for thousands of years. They roofed the chamber with 9 massive granite beams, each weighing an estimated 50 tons. But they knew this alone would not be enough. Above this primary roof, they built a series of 5 small hidden compartments, one on top of the other, each separated by more massive granite beams. These are the so-called relieving chambers. Their purpose was not to relieve pressure in the modern sense, but to act as a sophisticated system to deflect the immense, focused forces of the pyramid's core away from the flat ceiling of the king's chamber and to safely channel that weight down into the solid masonry on either side. The uppermost of these hidden chambers was given a pointed gabled roof, the strongest shape for deflecting weight. This was an incredibly sophisticated solution to a massive structural problem, a secret piece of engineering hidden deep within the pyramid that was not rediscovered until the 19th century, when early explorers used gunpowder to blast their way into them. It is in these hidden chambers that the only confirmed inscription of Khufu's name in the entire pyramid was found, a simple scrawl of red paint left by one of the work gangs. The construction of this inner sanctum raises a host of difficult questions. The greatest of these is how the Egyptians managed to lift the 502 80-ton granite beams from the base of the pyramid up to the level of the king's chamber, a height of over 200 feet. And this is a challenge that would tax the capabilities of most modern cranes. The main construction ramp, whatever its form, would have been used for the 2.5-ton core blocks, but it may not have been wide or strong enough for these colossal granite megaliths. This is where Hewden's theory of the Grand Gallery as a counterweight machine provides a powerful and elegant potential solution. The final element of the internal structure was the elaborate security system. After the pharaoh's funeral and the placement of his mummy in the sarcophagus, the entrance to the king's chamber was sealed with a series of massive granite plug-in blocks. These blocks, which had been stored in the Grand Gallery during construction, were designed to slide down the ascending passage, completely and, in theory, permanently blocking it. The builders also created a series of hidden passages and shafts, including a small, rough-hewn well shaft that connects the Grand Gallery to the descending passage far below. This was almost certainly an escape route for the last of the workers. After they had sealed the main passage from the inside, allowing them to exit the pyramid without being trapped forever. The interior of the Great Pyramid was a complex, multi-layered fortress, a sacred machine designed to protect the king's body for all eternity. Its construction required a level of foresight, planning, and engineering skill that is hard to comprehend. The builders had to think in 3 dimensions, planning the intricate layout of the passages and chambers long before the first block was laid. They had to solve immense structural challenges and invent new techniques for lifting and positioning stones of a size that had never been attempted before. The inner sanctum is a testament to their ambition and their mastery of their craft, a secret granite heart hidden within a mountain of limestone, built to be the eternal and unbreachable home of a god. The story of the Great Pyramid is not just a tale of colossal stones and divine kings. It is, at its core, a profoundly human story. It is the story of the tens of thousands of skilled craftsmen, artisans, and laborers who devoted years, and often their entire lives, to these immense projects. To truly understand how the pyramid was built, we must zoom in from its monumental, almost inhuman scale to the level of the individual worker. We must feel the heft of the stone pounder in a quarryman's hand, smell the charcoal smoke of the coppersmith's forge, and hear the rhythmic chants of the hauling crews. The archaeological record from the workers' village, the quarries, and the pyramid itself allows us to reconstruct a vivid picture of these men, transforming them from an anonymous mass into living, breathing individuals with their own skills, struggles, and sense of pride. The true secrets of the pyramid's construction are held in the human element, the simple but effective tools they used, the clever techniques they developed, and the evidence of their highly organized daily lives. The toolkit of the pyramid builder was a testament to the ingenuity of a Bronze Age society, lacking iron, steel, pulleys, or wheels for transport. Their success lay in their absolute mastery of the simple but effective tools they did possess, materials drawn from the earth itself, stone, wood, and copper. Their entire technological system was based on a deep, practical understanding of the properties of these materials and the ability to organize their labor with incredible efficiency. The most fundamental and ubiquitous tool was the stone pounder. These were heavy, hand-held, spherical or ovoid balls of dolerite, a hard, dense igneous rock that was significantly tougher than the limestone, and even the granite they were quarrying. For thousands upon thousands of hours, workers would relentlessly bash these pounders against the bedrock. This was the primary method for creating the great trenches in the quarries, for breaking up rough sections of rock, and for the initial, rough shaping of the blocks. It was grueling, repetitive, and physically punishing work that relied on pure human stamina and the simple principle of percussion. The Giza Plateau would have echoed with the constant, rhythmic sound of stone striking. Stone, for the more precise work of cutting and dressing the softer limestone, the primary tool was the copper chisel. Copper was the hardest metal widely available to the Old Kingdom Egyptians, but it posed a significant challenge. It is a relatively soft metal, and its cutting edge would blunt, bend, and buckle quickly when used against stone. This inherent weakness meant that a huge and incredibly efficient support industry was needed to keep the thousands of quarrymen and masons supplied with usable tools. A team of smiths would have worked constantly in a dedicated, smoky workshop, likely located near the quarries. Their job was to collect the thousands of blunted and broken chisels at the end of each day, melt them down in charcoal-fired furnaces, and then recast them in open clay molds. The newly cast chisels would then be hardened through a process of hammer hardening and re-sharpened, ready for the next day's work. The logistics of supplying the vast quantities of copper, much of which was likely imported from the Sinai or the eastern desert, and the charcoal needed for the furnace's wood, have been a major industrial operation in itself. The workers would have used these copper chisels in combination with heavy wooden mallets to cut the limestone, to create the slots for the wooden wedges, and to dress the faces of the blocks to a smooth finished dot, to cut the incredibly hard granite. Of the king's chamber and the sarcophagus, copper chisels were of little use. Instead, the Egyptians employed copper saws. These were not the toothed saws we know today, but large, straight blades of copper, likely operated by two men. The cutting was not done by the soft copper blade itself, but by a powerful abrasive material that was fed into the saw cut. The workers would pour a slurry of water and quartz sand into the cut. Quartz, a mineral with a hardness of 7 on the Mohs scale, is significantly harder than the feldspar and mica that make up granite. The back-and-forth motion of the copper saw would drag these hard sand particles along, slowly and laboriously, grinding their way through the granite. They also used copper drills, likely rotated with a bow, in a similar way. A tube-shaped drill would be rotated while the abrasive sand slurry was fed into the cut, allowing them to drill out cores of stone, a technique they likely used to hollow out the inside of the great granite sarcophagi. This was an incredibly slow and painstaking process, requiring immense patience and perseverance, and it shows a sophisticated understanding of the principles of abrasion dot for the crucial tasks of surveying and ensuring the precision of the construction. The builders used a simple but elegant set of tools that were marvels of practical science. They used the plumb line, a weight, a plumb bob, suspended from a string, to establish perfect vertical lines for the walls and faces of the pyramid. They used a square level, an A-shaped wooden frame with a plumb line hanging from its apex. When the plumb bob hung exactly in the center of a mark on the crossbar, the surface upon which the 2 feet of the frame rested was perfectly horizontal. They used the set square, another A-frame, but with a 90-degree angle, to check the corners of their blocks. For longer distances and for sighting, they used a pair of instruments called the Merkhet and the Bay, a kind of astronomical transit, to track the stars and establish their alignments. These simple tools, in the hands of skilled and experienced master builders, were all that was needed to achieve the stunning, almost miraculous precision of the pyramids. The evidence of the daily lives of these workers discovered in the lost city of the pyramid builders has completely revolutionized our understanding of their society. This was a true city, a planned community, not a temporary labor camp. The long, dormitory-like galleries that served as barracks for the rotating conscripted laborers were highly organized. They contained raised sleeping platforms, lined with rush mats and central hearths for warmth and cooking. Each gallery was a self-contained unit, likely housing a single work gang, or zeh, of about 40 to 50 men, fostering a sense of team identity and community. The permanent, skilled workers, the master builders, scribes, and artisans who were the projects. Career professionals lived with their families in more substantial, private houses. These were modest but comfortable dwellings, with a layout similar to other Egyptian houses of the period. A front room that may have served as a workshop or reception area, a central columned living area, a private bedroom, and a rear kitchen, with an open courtyard for cooking. The sheer amount of domestic refuse found in and around these houses, broken pottery, animal bones, remnants of tools and clothing, has allowed archaeologists to reconstruct their diet and their lifestyle in incredible detail. They were not living at a bare subsistence level. They were living well, their standard of living a clear reflection of their value to the state. The city had a massive support infrastructure, a logistical tail that kept the army of workers fed and supplied. The remains of colossal bakeries have been found with large built-in hearths and hundreds of heavy, conical bread molds, indicating that thousands of loaves of bread were being produced on an industrial scale every single day. Similarly, the discovery of large vats and pottery jars confirms the presence of large breweries, providing the daily ration of beer that was a staple of the Egyptian diet, a source of calories and hydration, and a primary form of payment. The huge quantities of fish bones, often from large Nile perch, show that fish was another major source of protein, likely caught in the nearby canals and processed and dried in the city to feed the thousands of workers. The workers' cemetery, located on a hillside overlooking the city, provides some of the most personal and poignant evidence of their lives. The tombs of the common laborers are modest, dome-shaped, mud-brick mastabas, but they were built with care and respect. The workers were buried with honor, often wrapped in linen shrouds, placed in a fetal position facing east towards the rising sun, and provided with simple pottery vessels containing bread and beer for their journey to the next world. The more important individuals, the foremen and master artisans, had more elaborate tombs. These were larger, rectangular mastabas with stone-lined chapels, and they were often marked with small, carved stone stelae, inscribed with the owner's name and proud titles. like overseer of the masons or inspector of the craftsmen. Some even contained simple but vibrant painted reliefs depicting the deceased and his wife seated before an offering table. To be granted a burial at Giza, in the sacred shadow of the great pyramids they had helped to build, was a great privilege. It shows that the workers were not social outcasts, but respected members of a proud community whose monumental contribution to the divine project of the king was seen as a path to their own small piece of eternity. These men formed a unique and proud community, a society of specialists bound by their shared sacred work. Their skill, their organization, and their sheer, relentless labor were the true secrets of how the pyramids were built. At the very heart of the Great Pyramid, at the end of a long and complex series of passages, lies the ultimate destination, the king's chamber. It is a room of austere and somber grandeur, a perfect granite box built to withstand the weight of a mountain and the passage of eternity. And in the center of this chamber sits the final and most profound mystery of all, a large, broken, and completely empty granite sarcophagus. For centuries, this empty box has been the focal point of endless speculation, fueling theories of lost treasures, secret brotherhoods, and cosmic purposes. But the truth, as revealed by the long and often brutal history of the pyramid after its completion, is likely a more human story of greed, ingenuity, and the ultimate failure of even the greatest security systems. The mystery of the empty sarcophagus is the story of the great tomb robberies, a tale of how the eternal, unbreachable fortress of Khufu was, in all likelihood, conquered in antiquity, when the Caliph al-Mamun, the Arab ruler of Egypt, first forced his way into the Great Pyramid in the 9th century CE. He and his men were the first people to enter its upper chambers in perhaps 3,000 years. They had to cut their own tunnel through the solid limestone, a brutal and arduous task. When they finally broke through into the ascending passage, they found it sealed by the massive granite plugs the builders had put in place. They tunneled around these plugs and finally reached the king's chamber. They entered the granite sanctum, their torches casting flickering shadows on the ancient walls, and there they found nothing. The chamber was completely bare, and the great granite sarcophagus was empty, its heavy lid missing and a corner of the box itself broken away. The greatest treasure hunt in history had seemingly ended in failure. The question of what happened to the body of Khufu and his fabulous burial goods is the ultimate secret of the pyramid. There are three main possibilities. The first and least likely is that the pyramid was never intended to be a tomb at all. This is the view held by many esoteric and alternative theorists, who argue that the pyramid was built for a higher purpose, as a power plant, a water pump, a granary, or a place of initiation for a secret priesthood. In this view, the sarcophagus was not a coffin, but a device for focusing cosmic energy or for use in mystical ceremonies. While these theories are imaginative, they are completely unsupported by the vast body of archaeological and textual evidence. From ancient Egypt, every single pyramid that has been definitively identified with a specific king has been found to be part of a funerary complex. The pyramid texts found in later Old Kingdom pyramids are explicitly funerary in nature, filled with spells for the resurrection of the dead king. The entire structure of the Giza necropolis, with its mortuary temples and its cemeteries for the royal family and the workers, points to a funerary purpose. The Great Pyramid was, without any serious doubt, a tomb. The second possibility is that the pharaoh was never buried there in the first place. Some have suggested that the pyramid was a cenotaph, a symbolic tomb, and that Khufu was secretly buried elsewhere to protect his body from robbers. This is a more plausible theory, but it also runs contrary to the evidence. The sheer scale and complexity of the Great Pyramid and the immense resources poured into its construction make it highly unlikely that it was a mere decoy. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber, while undecorated, is a masterpiece of stone carving, and it was clearly placed there to hold the king's body. The elaborate sealing mechanism of the granite plugs was designed to protect something of immense value. All the evidence suggests that the pyramid was intended to be, and almost certainly was, the final resting place of the pharaoh Khufu. This leaves the third, and by far the most likely explanation. The tomb was robbed in antiquity. The empty sarcophagus is not a sign of a mystical purpose, but a silent testament to the skill and audacity of ancient tomb robbers. The Great Pyramid, for all its security features, had been breached. The question then becomes when and how. The how is a matter of intense debate. The original entrance on the north face was sealed with a massive stone block and then concealed behind the smooth white limestone casing, making it invisible. The main ascending passage was blocked by the three massive granite plugs. The robbers, therefore, would have needed an alternative way in. It is possible that they managed a tunnel around the granite plugs, just as Al-Mamun's men did. This would have required a huge amount of labor and a sophisticated understanding of the pyramid's internal layout. A more compelling theory is that the robbers knew of, or discovered, the secret escape route of the original builders, the rough-hewn well shaft that connects the grand gallery to the descending passage. They could have entered through the main entrance, gone down the descending passage, and then climbed up the well shaft, bypassing the granite plugs and gaining access to the upper chambers. This would have required great courage and climbing skill, but it would have been a far more efficient method than tunneling through solid rock once inside the king's chamber. They would have been faced with the sealed granite sarcophagus. The lid, a single massive slab of granite weighing several tons, would have been lowered into place and sealed with mortar. To open it would have been an immense challenge. They may have used a series of powerful wooden levers to slowly and painstakingly pry the lid off. The broken corner of the sarcophagus may be evidence of this process, a place where a lever was inserted with too much force, causing the granite to fracture. Once the lid was off, the plundering would have begun. The burial of a great 4th Dynasty pharaoh like Khufu would have been a treasure trove of unimaginable wealth. The king's mummy would have been encased in a series of nested coffins, possibly, including one of solid gold, similar to Tutankhamun's. A magnificent golden funerary mask would have covered his face. His body would have been adorned with a vast collection of amulets and jewelry made of gold, lapis lazuli, and other precious stones. The chamber would have been filled with his funerary equipment, ceremonial weapons, golden vessels, alabaster jars, and perhaps even furniture inlaid with gold and ivory. The robbers would have stripped the mummy of its treasures, broken up the golden coffins to be carried away more easily, and taken every single object of value from the chamber. In their haste and their greed, they would have likely smashed many of the less valuable items, leaving the chamber a scene of desecration and chaos. They would have then made their escape, leaving behind only the empty, broken granite box. When did this robbery take place? It is almost impossible to say for certain, but it was likely very early in the pyramid's history. The Great Pyramids of the Fourth Dynasty were such an obvious and tempting target that they were likely breached during the first period of social and political collapse that followed the Old Kingdom. The first intermediate period, circa 2181 to 2055 BCE. During this time of civil war and famine, the central authority of the state collapsed, and the security of the great royal necropolises could no longer be guaranteed. It was a time of widespread lawlessness and the plundering of the ancient. Sacred tombs would have been rampant. It is a poignant and powerful irony that the very men who built the pyramid may have been the ones who ultimately plundered it. The secrets of the pyramid's construction and its complex internal layout would have been passed down through the generations of the craftsmen and officials who lived in the pyramid towns. During a time of collapse, when the state was no longer paying them and their families were starving, the temptation to use this secret, inherited knowledge to access the immense wealth stored within the pyramid would have been overwhelming. The most successful tomb robbers would have been the ones who knew exactly where to dig. The empty sarcophagus of Khufu is not a mystery that points to another world or a lost science. It is a deeply human story. It is a story of the eternal conflict between the human desire for eternal life and the human desire for earthly wealth. Khufu and his architects built a monument that was designed to last for millions of years, a perfect fortress to guard his body and his treasures. But they were ultimately defeated by the ingenuity, the desperation, and the greed of their own descendants. The secret of the empty sarcophagus is the secret that no tomb, however great, can ever be truly safe from the passions of the living. The lost treasures of Khufu are not waiting to be found in some hidden chamber. They were almost certainly melted down and dispersed into the economy of ancient Egypt thousands of years ago. The golden dream of a god-king recycled to meet the more immediate needs of mortals. The sealing of the Great Pyramid and the establishment of its funerary cult was intended to be the beginning of an eternal story. But after the plundering of the tomb, likely in the chaos of the first intermediate period, the pyramid's original sacred function came to a definitive end. The mountain of stone, however, remained. For the next 4,500 years, the Great Pyramid would have a long and complex second life, not as a functioning tomb, but as an object of awe, a source of legend, a convenient quarry, a tourist destination, and finally, as a priceless archaeological site and a symbol of human history itself. The story of the pyramid after its construction is a story of how it was seen, used, and interpreted by the successive generations and civilizations that lived in its immense shadow. During the New Kingdom, nearly 1,000 years after its construction, the Giza Plateau experienced a period of renewed religious significance. The Great Pyramids of the Old Kingdom were already ancient and mysterious monuments, seen as the work of the great ancestors. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom, particularly Thutmose IV, revered the site. Thutmose famously recorded a story on a stela that he placed between the paws of the great Sphinx. The dream stele tells how, as a young prince, he fell asleep in the shadow of the Sphinx, which was then buried up to its neck in sand. The Sphinx, who was the embodiment of the sun, god Hor-Emakhet, appeared to him in a dream and promised him the throne of Egypt if he would clear away the sand that was choking it. Thutmose did as he was asked, and he became pharaoh. This story shows that the Giza Plateau was seen as a place of potent magic and divine communication, and the great monuments were revered as sacred relics of a glorious past. The son of Ramesses, the great Kamwiset, a high priest of Memphis, was one of the world's first archaeologists and preservationists. He made a career of identifying and restoring the ancient temples and monuments of the Old Kingdom, including the pyramids, leaving inscriptions to record his work. But it was the arrival of the Greeks that marked the beginning of the pyramids' second life as an object of international fascination. The Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE, was the first to write a detailed, systematic account of the pyramids for a foreign audience. His histories are the primary source for many of the popular stories and facts about the pyramids that have endured to this day. It was Herodotus who gave us the figure of 100,000 men working in 3-month shifts. It was he who recorded the likely false story of Khufu's cruelty, and it was he who described the machines used to lift the blocks. While his account is filled with inaccuracies and tall tales he heard from his local guides, it is also an invaluable record of how the pyramids were understood in his time. For the Greeks, the pyramids were the ultimate symbol of the immense antiquity, the despotic power, and the almost superhuman labor of ancient Egypt. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and his general Ptolemy established a Greek-speaking dynasty, Egyptomania swept through the Hellenistic world. The pyramids became the #1 tourist attraction of the ancient world. They were the first of the 7 wonders of the ancient world to be listed, and they're the only one that still survives. Wealthy Greeks and later Romans would travel to Egypt to marvel at these ancient structures. They would hire local guides, climb to the top of the Great Pyramid, and, like modern tourists, they would often carve their own graffiti into the stones to commemorate their visit. The geographer Strabo, who visited in the 1st century BCE, provides a detailed description of the pyramid, including the now lost swinging stone that once concealed its entrance. This age of tourism and reverence came to an end with the decline of the Roman Empire and the rise of Christianity. For the early Christians of Egypt, the pyramids were seen as pagan monuments, the idolatrous creations of tyrannical kings. They were of little interest except as a source of local folklore. It was during the subsequent Islamic period that the pyramid suffered its greatest physical damage. In the 9th century CE, the Abbasid Caliph al-Mamun, spurred by tales of a secret chamber filled with treasure and ancient knowledge, forced his way into the pyramid. His men, unable to find the hidden entrance, used brute force, lighting great fires to heat the limestone and then dousing it with cold vinegar to crack the stones, before tunneling their way into the interior. It was this expedition that discovered the empty king's chamber and gave rise to the enduring legend of the pyramid's hidden treasures. more destructive. However, was the decision made in the 14th century CE by the Sultan an-Nasir to strip the Great Pyramid of its beautiful polished white limestone casing. The casing stones were a convenient pre-cut source of high-quality building material, and they were systematically removed and used to build the mosques, fortresses, and city walls of medieval Cairo. This single act of state-sponsored quarrying is what reduced the pyramid from a gleaming, perfect white monument to the rough, stepped, tan-colored structure we see today. It was an act of cultural vandalism on a colossal scale, but for the rulers of medieval Cairo, the stones of their new city were far more important than the relics of a dead, pagan civilization. The modern scientific study of the pyramids began. In the wake of Napoleon Bonaparte's invasion of Egypt in 1798, Napoleon brought with him not just an army, but a scientific and artistic commission of 167 scholars, scientists, and artists. These savants conducted the first systematic survey of the pyramids and the other monuments of ancient Egypt. They meticulously measured, drew, and described everything they saw, and their findings were published in the monumental multi-volume work, Description de l'Egypte. This publication, along with the discovery of the Rosetta Stone by Napoleon's soldiers, ignited a new and intense wave of Egyptomania in Europe and laid the foundations for the modern science of Egyptology. The 19th and 20th centuries were the great age of pyramid exploration and excavation. A succession of European and American archaeologists, from the eccentric treasure hunter Giovanni Belzoni to the methodical Flinders Petrie, who conducted the first truly scientific survey of the Giza Plateau, blasted, tunneled, and dug there, way through the sands, revealing the temples, the causeways, and the tombs that surrounded the great monuments. This was a period of immense discovery, but also of great rivalry and national competition, as the museums of Europe vied with each other to acquire the finest Egyptian artifacts. Today, the Great Pyramid has a new and different kind of life. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a protected archaeological zone, and one of the world's most recognizable and popular tourist destinations, visited by millions of people each year. It is also an active site of scientific research. A new generation of archaeologists and scientists are using non-invasive technologies, such as ground-penetrating radar, cosmic ray Mon imaging, and thermal scanning, to probe the pyramids, interior in search of hidden chambers, and to learn more about its construction, all without moving a single stone. The Scan Pyramids Project, for example, has recently announced the discovery of a large, previously unknown void deep within the pyramid, a new mystery waiting to be explained. The Great Pyramid has, therefore, lived many lives. It was a sacred resurrection machine for a divine king. It was a holy site of pilgrimage in the new kingdom. It was the greatest tourist attraction of the classical world. It was a source of dark legends and recycled building materials in the medieval period, and it is now a global cultural icon and a priceless source of scientific information about our shared human past. This enduring power to fascinate, to inspire awe, and to generate new questions is perhaps its greatest secret of all. The empty sarcophagus may have been plundered long ago, but the pyramid itself remains the ultimate treasure, a gift from the ancient world that continues to enrich and challenge us with its silent geometric majesty. Our journey through the dust of the Giza Plateau and the long corridors of history comes to a close. We've seen that the Egyptian pyramids, these seemingly simple geometric forms, are objects of immense complexity. They are not just piles of stone, but the product of a unique and powerful vision of the cosmos, a vision that drove a nation to dedicate its entire economy and the labor of generations to their construction. We have unraveled the divine blueprint, understanding the pyramid as a sacred machine for the resurrection of a divine king. We have walked through the streets of the lost city of the workers, dispelling the myth of slave labor and discovering a community of skilled, well-fed, and proud Egyptians organized with a level of efficiency that is still astounding. We have journeyed to the ancient quarries at Tura and Aswan, witnessing the raw human effort required to free the megaliths from the earth. We have followed the path of these giant stones, moved by sledge and by ship, along canals that brought the Nile to the very foot of the sacred mountain. We have explored the great ramp debate, the central mystery of their construction, and we have ventured deep into the pyramid's heart, to the granite-lined king's chamber, a masterpiece of precision and structural engineering. We have seen how the final, gleaming white casing and the golden capstone transformed a construction site into a celestial object, a beacon of light and a stairway to the stars. The secrets of the pyramids, then, are not secrets of alien technology or lost, paranormal powers. They are the secrets of human ingenuity, of profound faith, and of incredible social organization. The pyramids stand as an enduring testament to the power of a unified vision. They teach us that with a compelling enough why, human beings are capable of achieving an almost impossible how. They are the ultimate monuments to the human capacity to dream, to organize, and to build for eternity. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with the silent, geometric majesty of these ancient wonders.